It is so good to see everyone coming in and representing all different parts of the country. Thank you for joining us today. This is Shelter Force's Her Story, Her Power. My name is Shalon Hawkins. I am the CEO and publisher of Shelter Force, and I am so excited about this time. One, it's Women's History Month, and as you can see, we have these beautiful women with us this afternoon to talk all things community development. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. If you don't know, Her Story, Her Power was birthed out of our series, and hopefully you've been tuning in. Every March, we have been profiling women across the country who are doing amazing things in the community. They are, and specifically women of color, the movers and shakers that are at the forefront of change, transforming their communities by any means necessary. We are profiling those women. And that's out of our series, Women of Color on the Front Lines. If you have not had an opportunity to take a look at those video features of the class of women that we have profiled, please do so. The link is in the chat. But more importantly, we had two women that we profiled this year, Annette Miller, who's from Oakland, California, and then also to Commissioner Selah Bruno, I apologize for that, who actually started out as a community organizer and worked her way up as housing commissioner in Connecticut. So again, this is something we do every March, but I'm really excited about today because we get to have conversations with women that are doing the darn thing in their communities. And so I'm not going to belabor any more longer. I am going to turn it over to these lovely women, let them have this conversation. And what I like to say is we're just having a little brunch. This is a brunch conversation with friends that are in this field. And so I'm going to turn it over. You guys, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will direct them to the panelists towards the end of this conversation. Deletta, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Good afternoon and welcome. And thank you for joining us. My name is Deletta Dean. I'm the Vice President of the Midwest Region for NeighborWorks America. NeighborWorks America is a congressionally chartered organization. We do training of community development and affordable housing practitioners. We also provide funding to organizations who provide affordable housing and community development across the nation. My region particularly has 13 states and 58 organizations. My pronouns are she and her. I am a Black female with short blonde hair and an undercut. I'm wearing a Black blazer and a Black t-shirt featuring a Black woman who is a superhero. Next, we will have Wendy introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Wendy Santamaria. I am an organizer based out of Santa Barbara, California. I do a lot of community organizing, primarily around housing and workers' rights, and my focus is primarily on the Latino Spanish-speaking community. We have been organizing in Santa Barbara for many, many years for stronger tenant protections, for building affordable housing and preserving the remains of affordable housing that we have left. And we have been, especially during the pandemic, have seen an extreme uptick of housing insecurity in our communities. And so in my full-time job, I work as a labor organizer for the American Federation of State, Municipal, and County Employees, Local 3299. So I work with our service workers who keep the University of California system running across the state. And in my, off time, in my free time, I am an organizer with our Santa Barbara Tenants Union, and we have been making sure that we are organizing folks and really breaking down those barriers so we can create a movement that is very inclusive and really is able to move our goals forward. I'll turn it over to Jamie. Oh, sorry, give me 1 second. I have to do the visual description, but my visual description is I am a Mexican woman. I have long black hair and I'm wearing a black button-up. I'll turn it over to Jamie now.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Deletta. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Gloshay. Pronouns are she, her. I'm zooming in from Tiwa Territory, also known as Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's a beautiful spring day. We had like winter literally yesterday. I am an Indigenous woman with long brown hair and wearing a floral top today. I am also the managing director of impact investments at Common Future. We're a national organization that supports communities across the country and organizations across the country to stand up their own lending programs that are primarily community led and community informed and through decision making as well. We also, on the other side of our wheelhouse and within the impact investments part, we also support emerging fund and fund managers so that folks can flow capital to their communities and support them to have the agency power, access, and affordability to capital so that they can do the amazing work that they're doing. Thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Maggie.
Thanks, Jamie. Good to see everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Maggie Parker. My pronouns are she, her, and just my visual description, I am an African-American woman. I too am wearing black, but a little bit of puffy sleeves. I have an afro that's a little short, and I'm wearing glasses. So a little bit about me. I am from Dallas, Texas, and have a company called Innovon Neighborhoods where we're primarily doing real estate development on community-oriented projects. I work with some nonprofits and faith-based organizations on their real estate deals, as well as have an initiative called the Community Developers Roundtable, working with developers of color who are already doing deals in this market and raise capital in order to help them grow their existing businesses. On the development side, mainly working in public-private partnerships with local governments, focusing on mix of incomes in those developments. And so just trying to move some great projects forward. So excited for the conversation today, and I'll give it to Chelsie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chelsie Evans Enos. I'm calling in from Honolulu, Hawaii. I have the background behind me that says welcome to Makua, which is actually where I was born and raised, and where I like to have that in my Zoom meetings so I feel like home in all my meetings. I am a Native Hawaiian woman wearing also black, a jacket with a white t-shirt underneath. I have a necklace here with a small pendant that has my son, who I lost last year, his fingerprint imprinted on here, and I carry that everywhere I go. I'm the executive director of Hawaiian Community Assets. We are the largest HUD-certified organization here in Hawaii. We utilize today's practices of financial education, but we connect it with the historical context of money and finances with Hawaiians. We talk about just kind of the colonization of Hawaii and the type of relationship Hawaiians have with money, so that we can get past some of those barriers and get people into homes. Yeah, looking forward to today's conversation.
All right, thanks, Chelsie. So I will get us started off, and this will be an unmoderated discussion, so we're all looking forward to it. So the first question is, what is top of mind for you today as it pertains to community development? What should the field be paying attention to? And let's start with Maggie.
All right. I think there's a lot of things going on that are top of mind for me, right? I'm usually thinking about housing. I'm usually thinking about how people are gaining access to equitable housing. But I had a conversation yesterday that I think for me switches top of mind of how we're thinking about this affirmative action case that came out of the Supreme Court and how that's actually trickling down to a lot of conversations that we're having around DEI, how that impacts communities that are typically underserved, and then the language that we're putting around that, right? So, while many of us didn't necessarily say that we're focused on DEI specifically in our work, it touches it, right? And so when we look at the funders, when we look at where major corporations are putting, their time and efforts, when we look at the capacity of women in this space, specifically women of color in this space, and folks are wanting to target that, we look at, what the lawsuit that's coming around Fearless Fund, and people wanting to shut that down. I'm sure there's other lawsuits that are coming on the horizon. And so I am curious from the group, like, how is everyone thinking about that in their work, right? I think it's to me, it's a pressing conversation, because whether we work on DEI or kind of the implications of this affirmative action conversation in the short term, is it impacting how you are thinking about that, either in your communities or in the organizations that you're working in?
It's
Maybe.
definitely been an interesting time for sure. I know we often get asked, what is your DEI statement or policy internally? It's been a difficult thing for our organization to answer, because we literally were created due to the lack of accessibility for Native Hawaiians to loans and programs. And so we actually don't have a DEI statement. We're literally like, we are DEI. It's why we're here. It's what we breathe. That's been a harder conversation actually to even have with funders of, well, that we need to check that box. And I feel like in the Native Hawaiian sense, like, everything comes from our history, right? Our kupuna, the people that came before us, the people who worked before us. And it feels odd to put it in a very a few words. And I think the cultural piece of fitting into these boxes have been difficult for us. And then now to see these new things coming out of the courts, it does make me wonder if we're in a better place, because we haven't necessarily put anything in writing that people can try to push back on necessarily. It's just who we are. It doesn't fix the problem for sure, but I think that's been one thing we've been having heavy discussion on. I think our work is just going to get harder for sure. There's going to be less and less resources, and ignoring the fact that people from from various communities, indigenous communities, immigrants, the lack of services are just already, there's such a huge gap. And to have that fight, I feel like we do need to be innovative in our approaches moving forward. Yeah. That was no answer, sorry, but.
No, I don't think there's an answer, right? But like, for me, that was top of mind. So I think hearing, from your perspective, especially when you're saying like that's the core of our organization, right? So like, why do we need to defend who we are and the reason that we are existing? So I mean, for me, that's top of mind, and I appreciate kind of the lens that you're bringing from your perspective. So
thank you for this, Maggie. It's incredibly top of mind for us too, not only in the work that I get to do at Common Future, but the communities I get to serve, especially when you're in like racial, social, gender, economic justice work, and we're sensing and seeing this like intentional targeting. And I'm really thinking about, like, for community building and community, how do we insulate, protect, and continue to fight for justice? And being mindful of what you shared, Chelsie, around, I think, the fear around less resources, because our communities have been in like survival and scarcity, and we're trying to get into the space of abundance. So for me, I'm really thinking about how do we create spaces to cultivate radical imagination, healing, especially with all the injustice that has happened, as well as a space to be in an abundance of support and protection while we're still trying to do catalytic impact in our communities as folks that are leaning towards like justice-oriented work. So thank you for that. But yeah, Wendy, I'm curious if you have anything to add.
Absolutely. Jamie, I really wanted to jump off of what you mentioned. Radical imagination of just a better world, I think has really been top of mind for me. And I think back to what Maggie was mentioning, we see in our communities of color, I mean, the lack of investment, the lack of resource. I mean, we see all of that. And like you mentioned, Jamie, we're we've been in survival mode for so long that I think part of community development is really making sure and doing our best to cultivate a space where people don't lose hope. I think hope is a very underestimated thing, because it's often when we are able to show that coming together and show that moving mountains really is possible with all of us, actually joining forces. I think that has been one of the ways that we can tackle, the attacks on our communities of color. I think when we end up focused only on, the issues that we're going through, and we're in the survival mode where we're just reacting to what's happening, sometimes it's hard to see beyond that, right? But when we are able to cultivate a space where we say, okay, we're going to deal with the pressing issue here, we're going to deal with, rising rents, mass evictions happening, people being homeless out on the streets, we're going to deal with that. But we also want to reimagine a world where that is no longer an issue. How do we reimagine that so that there is diversity, equity, and inclusion in our work, right? So that the work that we do and the services that we're pushing for are equitable and really going to the communities that really, really need it, and really getting to the root of the issue rather than just pushing for band-aid solutions. And so I think in community developments, something that's really top of mind is really integrating the community in decision-making, and really, really centering them and centering lived experiences in decision-making. Because I think a lot of, especially I work a lot with local governments, and a lot of local politicians will not have this lived experience and may have gone to school and got degrees and all of that. But at the end of the day, they don't understand what it is to be living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 families in there. And I mean, this is just a very common thing that we see due to our housing crisis. And a lot of local electeds don't understand that, because they've never been through it, and they've never really spoken to community that has been through it. And so the decisions they make, the policies they pass, are not actually addressing the root of the issue. They're just, band-aid solutions. And so when I think about community development, it's a mix of course, everything that you have all mentioned. I think every single part of that is a piece of this web, right? We want to make sure that if we are not getting that funding or that prioritization from other foundations or other governments, that we make ourselves a priority, that we unite, and that we push for our lived experiences to be reflected in these decisions. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna jump in here. And you're spot on, Wendy. Community development sustains affordable housing, right? It sustains the work of developers. So it's very critical. It's important. For me, top of mind is, one of the things about NeighborWorks America that I really enjoy is that we understand many Black and Brown communities, there has been historical disinvestment. We understand that. NeighborWorks is very intentional about working with organizations in these areas. We are also intentional about generational Black wealth and building generational Black wealth. So when we talk about, communities where there's been disinvestment, of course, we know in many urban communities across the nation that we've experienced that. Lived experience, I grew up in one of those disinvested neighborhoods right here in Kansas City. So being very intentional about having individuals at the table as we shape those decisions are critical. But what's top of mind for me is home ownership in these communities because of the rising interest rates. There's a lack of supply. And a lack of down payment assistance. And we know that home ownership is a vehicle to building generational wealth. So we want to be able to make sure that we at first, teach financial capability to individuals to help them be able to achieve that dream that so many of us have not been able to achieve because of barriers that are created that are beyond us, systematic racism, and we can go on and on. But we want to be able to make sure that we provide access to all individuals, equitable access, not equality, but we're talking about things being equitable. Is a big difference there. All right, let's go to question 2.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deletta, and everybody for sharing. I'm curious, and just witnessing your activation of the work that you get to do, but what is your why? like what led you to a career in community development? How do you hope to make an impact in your community or leave a legacy in this space? And I'll just model my why is my children. I'm thinking about the world they're going to inherit, the conditions in which they will have to live, and really thinking about their social, mental, psychological, physical well-being and safety. I'm a mother of Indigenous girls, and in this country, Indigenous erasure is really huge because we represent less than 3% of the population. If you think of that from a gender perspective, less than 1.5% of the population. And there's a huge issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women happening in this country here and in the globe as well. So that's my why. I'm like thinking about the future they're going to inherit, the safety, the well-being, as well as like what I can do in this moment in time to have an impact in my community. But I would love to hear yours. Maggie, you want to go next?
Yeah, so for me, in growing up in Dallas, I lived on one side of town and went to school on another. And I really realized that where you lived had such an impact on what the future that you thought you could have, right? And so I really became aware of cities, how people move, how neighborhoods change, how the decision makers do X, Y, Z. As I got further into the work that I was doing, I saw that real estate was really at the core of all of the systematic inequalities that we discuss and see every day, right? Where schools are located is a real estate decision. Jobs, where jobs are, where fresh food access is, where you can drive down the road, those are all real estate decisions. And so for me, I wanted to be able to impact that and be influential in that space. And I felt like being in the real estate space, specifically being a developer, was a way for me to have a say in what the long-term trajectory is, not just for my, like my immediate community, but just the generations that come next, right? Because a lot of these decisions are 30 and 40, 50-year decisions. And so getting engaged in that work right now, and on the real estate side of things is really my why. I grew up with a family where we were just caring for others around us and want to see others thrive. And so I carry that with me. It's just, I want to carry my community in the work that I'm doing. And I think real estate is a tool to do that. So that's my why and kind of my background. Wendy, did you have some thoughts from the work that you're doing?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Jamie. For me, my why is because I believe housing insecurity is the way that people are being kept distracted. I think it's the way that people are being kept almost tied to just simply surviving and fighting to survive, and we cannot focus on anything else. I mean, when I work with communities and different working families, I mean, their top of mind thing is always, I need to pay bills, I need to get to work, my kids, like the very basics, right? And to see the psychological trauma that mothers and just families are going through because they can't pay rent, because they're facing an eviction, because that they're about to be homeless with their children. I mean, you start to notice that all of the other issues going on in the community, whether it's, our environment's being polluted, or, there is an abundance of investment in police and instead of in community resources, right? And preventative measures, like you start to see all these things, but you can't really find the mental space, the time, nothing to actually fight against these things. And so for me, the phrase cost of living, I have a very particular distaste for it, because it just seems, it seems wild to me that, no one asks to be born, and yet there is a price to be alive. And there's something about people having to pay their way to just be allowed to live, be allowed to exist, right? And when we are kept with starvation wages, high rents, high costs of living, I mean, we are just stuck in that cycle of make just enough money so that I'm not homeless, and then I can't really focus on anything else. But I mean, if we were to help solve the housing crisis, and we were able to provide housing stability for people, then we would be able to organize in communities in a much larger extent. And we would be able to really divert that focus from survival mode to really going into thriving mode for our communities, because it's really hard to ask people, you should get involved and you should participate and you should go speak at city council and do this, but they're like, I'm working. I have 2 to 3 jobs. I mean, most people here are not just with one job. And so for me, my why is that I can't stomach to see all of these families that are simply just trying to survive. And myself, I grew up in the Inland Empire in Southern California, and it's a very, very heavily polluted area. It's like warehouse central. And I remember growing up thinking that getting asthma was just the rite of passage. Like everybody was going to get asthma because pretty much everybody in my elementary school had it. And I was just waiting for it to happen to me. And it fortunately never did. But I ended up moving to Santa Barbara for college and then worked out here. And then I just never left. And I mean, there's a big difference between Colton, San Bernardino, where I grew up in Santa Barbara. There's different investments. There's all sorts of differences, but the inequality is still there. The everybody being stuck in survival mode, in this crisis mode, it's still very much there, no matter how beautiful a city looks or no matter how touristy it seems. I mean, if anything, that is where some of the biggest inequality lies. And so I think for me, that's my why. I really want to get to that root of the issue.
Chelsie, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, my why's a little long. I think it changes as I always say I do what community asks for, that it's the space of being able to give back. I also think that, I've had personal things in my life that have not been easy to go through, but in a lot of ways I look at learning experiences and being able to say, hey, this is what things are like when times are hard. Just like you were referring to, Wendy, and that gives me an opportunity to advocate for people who have less. I've worked in the nonprofit world since I was 18. I've worked at various communities, from sexual assault, domestic violence, orphan and destitute children, Native Hawaiians, just kind of the whole gamut. And every single place I worked for, housing was an issue, right? We couldn't deal with what they came to us for until the social determinants of health were handled, and housing being one of the largest issues there. I've been through a lot. I was a teen mom, went through DV myself quite a bit. Took me a while to get out of that relationship, and then finally worked really hard to kind of get stabilized. My daughter got really sick. She got this rare autoimmune disease that required us to move from Hawaii Island over to Oahu. Because medical care in Hawaii, if you need serious medical care, there's one island to go to for that. And the doctor said, you have to move. So I moved there and attempted to hold my work. I had already had, at least 10 years of nonprofit experience. I lost my job sitting at the bedside of her, trying to care for her. And that was rough, dealing with the housing insecurity, dealing with lack of access to medical care and support during that process. I was lucky enough to have an amazing mom. She's actually on here listening to me today. I had to move home. I slept on her couch. She let me sleep on her couch, and my daughters had a bedroom there. And until we could get back up and do this again, we bought a house in Makawao, and it was at that time what I thought was really expensive. And and within 4 years, it raised an equity in over $350,000, which is not, it's for someone who owns it, it's great, but that's the reality of how quickly the housing prices rise here in Hawaii, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to keep up with that has been insane. And so during COVID, while that was all kind of happening, I got into real estate. I wanted to learn a little bit more about real estate investments because I felt from the nonprofit lens, we were coming from, we refer to it as a downstream reaction instead of upstream. And during COVID, we kept talking about how are people coming in and purchasing these homes, cash, just that whole, I know it happened across the country, but definitely watching it in Hawaii was really scary. And so I took a few real estate investment classes to try to figure out how are people doing this? Does everyone really have millions of dollars of cash? The houses here are median income are between 1.1 to 1.4, depending on what island you go on. And learned that there are actually various ways to purchase real estate. And so I started it. I started doing that on the side. That's actually what brought me to Hawaiian Community Assets. Was a few people, they were texting me this job. They're like, this is yours, this is yours. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was really comfortable in the space that I was at. But led me here and allowed me to start our first kind of rent-to-own program where we use real estate investment skills. We capture those properties before anyone else does, and we hand them over to our clients, and we say, work with your housing counselor. You got about 2 years to qualify to purchase this from us. And to us, it's an innovative way of getting around new developments, because here in Hawaii, if you're going to do a new development, you're not going to break ground for at least 5 years. And our people can't wait 5 years. We have to do this now. And in the meantime, there are properties flying off the market from other buyers. And so we're trying to insert ourselves to do that. And that's fun for me and exciting that I have this skill that we can try to bring in, and what people call innovative, but really real estate investors have been doing this for forever. It's not that innovative. It's just doing it in a nonprofit lens. We need less profit, so we can keep those things affordable. But that excites me to try something new.
All right, I'll jump in here and I'll make this quick because I know we're running out of time here. Lived experience for me, teenage mom living in a zip code that would have had me a statistic, right? And I saw a community that I wanted to change. Did housing as a Section 8 case manager and had young women that were sitting across from me that were the same age as me, that just didn't not have the support system that I had. So I was very intentional about the path, my career path, so that I could be, such as a time as this, right in this space, so that I can help other individuals like me to be able to become homeowners and to be able to become as assets in their community in terms of advocating for a better quality living conditions. So we will go to question 3, and we'll try and expedite this and get through it so that we can go to our individuals that have joined us and get some questions from them.
Okay, I am definitely curious. I know I have personally faced some barriers as a wahine or female a leader in the space. There are some people who love my ideas and some people who would prefer I not be in the room. Curious what that's been like for all of you, if anyone has experienced that, and just kind of your thoughts on either advocating so that happens less, or your thoughts on getting through those barriers.
I think for me, I'll chime in. I've experienced some of those challenges as well. When you talk about people questioning why you're in the room, if your voice even matters, are you the actual decision maker? And when things like that happen, I'm like, well, deuces, I don't have to work with you. That's my first thought. But I think for me, the way I have navigated it, 2 things. One, I've had to come more self-assured of who I am, right? That I know I'm supposed to be there, that this kind of thought around imposter syndrome is a thought, but it doesn't have to be my reality. And so I can move in with a different level of confidence, and that's taken some time. Second to that is really focusing on who's bringing me in the room and how they have introduced me. And so really trying to find those sponsors, mentors, advocates, who can kind of help position the conversation a little bit better, so that I can kind of try to block out some of those barriers. And so I've tried to create those relationships intentionally. Deletta,
Yeah, for me, if they don't have a seat for me at the table, I bring my own chair. So it's just a matter of, there are barriers, I think, obviously, to being a woman and then also being a Black woman. But I will first let my presence speak for itself. And then also just the knowledge and experience that I have here in the field, gained from organizations like NeighborWorks America and beyond that. It gives us the opportunity to be able to engage individuals as thought leaders in this space. Jamie, what's your thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah, +1 to all of that. I feel like I've had to really build that muscle in my speaking and like feeling that I'm reclaiming space and that I should be there. Also developing tools for myself to self-advocate, centering my live, learn, and labored experience. Those are all valuable. And just building self-awareness around one, like who's in the room, how do we enhance the work that we're doing by developing and being in right relationship with folks, and then resourcing myself. I do run into challenges and barriers, especially with what you named in like racism and those perceptions that people have. So I have to be self-aware of when I get activated in a response. And to your point around bringing my own chair, I think we've also had to build our own tables. So thank you so much. I'm going to send that over to Chelsie now.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think,
Wendy, whoever.
no, go ahead, Wendy.
Sorry, I was muted. I think for me, yeah, plus one to everything that you all mentioned. I think for me, I have ran into the issue of course, being a woman, but also being young. I am 26 years old, and a lot of people, I mean, still think that I'm an intern, right? And they still think that I have no lived experience, that I have no idea what I'm doing, right? And at the end of the day, what I have done is I have taken my strengths, my lived experience, what I have done in the community, and it ends up being my strength and the other person's weakness. Because a lot of times when I'm in the room with, let's say, elected officials or other folks, decision makers who don't really know the dire situation in the community, who are they coming to actually ask what's going on? Myself and the other folks in the community. And so mindset has really been a big part of it, where I really want to emphasize on the fact that the reason I'm in the room is because the other people in the room, that person's missing something that I have. They're missing that knowledge. They're missing that lived experience. They're missing those connections in the community. And so, yeah, we're bringing our own chairs. We're building our tables. We're going to build our own institutions if we need to. But this has to be something that we as women, I mean, we have to find our community, our base that is able to support us and really push us on to get through those barriers. But I think at the end of the day, our womanhood is truly that strength that I think if we tap into it, then we're able to show that we can get through it. So
I agree. I want to jump in here. In terms of youth, I experienced all of that. I get that. And I think for those of us that are more mature in this space, it's up to us. It's our responsibility to be able to provide access to our younger counterparts, if you will, to be even mentors, so that we can create a safe space and so that we can bring you all alongside. Because you know, it's like I have a younger staff here, and they see things from a different perspective, and I appreciate that. I embrace that. I welcome it. And it's my responsibility to make sure that I equip them to take this space, take my space when I move forward.
No, that's good. And powerful for sure, and appreciate you all. Chelsie, I'm gonna give you this next question just to see where we end up, right? So we talked a little bit about kind of everyone's lived experience and things like that, but I know we all share some wins, right? And we have a personal thought process of what success looks like for us. So I'm curious from the work that you're doing, and just personally, like, what's your measure of success? And in this world of community development, can you share what some of that success may have looked like?
Well, that's a hard one. I'm definitely the hardest assessor of my success. My board always says things and I'm like, really? I thought I could have done this better. That's difficult for me. But many times what I'm looking at is, have I done something that will have at least a step to an impact that'll make my kids' lives better? Like at the end of the day, it's, do my children have an even 1% better chance of getting access to housing, job security, and meeting their dreams? And have I given them opportunities to also take a look at what is available out there? Because I do feel like very much we get into the weeds of the grant reports and the financial reports and audit that I'm going through right now and all of that fun stuff. But can I take a step back and say, like, we've given community an opportunity to see the new options, to see what can be out there, which is a large goal, but anything more than where I started, to me is successful. Yeah.
love that. That's awesome. Jamie, did you have any thoughts on that question?
Thanks. I've been doing a lot of unlearning, I think, and decolonization around this like notion or definition of success within like a Western reframe or worldview. And I'm trying to really lean into like my Indigenous identity about what that looks like. Because I think a lot of our communities have been conditioned to labor, have been conditioned to produce in this like world of like capitalism. So I often think about like, what is safety as a success, especially as with Indigenous women, as I shared before, around like what's happening in our communities. What would it look like for me to have access, or my community or my family to have access to clean water, to our homelands, to live safely in our own homelands and territories, to have a home. So for me, I really lean into those types of ways to reframe what success looks like, and just being able to live a life not only of safety, but to like now get to us, to all of our communities, to a point where we can thrive together. Thank you. And I'll kick it over to Wendy.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief. My measure of success is I'm going to stay away from numbers, and I really like to focus on, did I bring people in to what I'm doing? Are people involved in the work that I'm doing and the decisions that I'm making? Because I firmly believe no one person has all of the answers. Not one person is going to be able to solve all this. We say it time and time again, it's going to take a village. And I think for any of the work that I do, if there is a decision to be made, did I bring in enough people to really give them the space to contribute to it, to really make sure that what we're doing is actually addressing the issue, right? It's not just some idea that I had. And so if I'm able to bring in community, bring in their input, their perspectives, and really create something that is formed out of those lived experiences, that's my version of success.
No, I love that. And I think especially Jamie and Wendy, all of you all have really reframed what success looked like. And I love that. And ever since I met you, Jamie, talking about really success being decolonized and it being a form of safety, that just touches my thought process in a different way. And so I appreciate that. I'll share my thoughts, and then Deletta, I'll toss it to you. For me, I'm really big on how do I recreate the opportunity that I have in starting my own business and doing community-oriented development work. It's very rare that we get a chance to do that and be backed by business partners. And so I want to make sure that people have the capital and the support to take on some of these longer term but impactful projects. And so once I'm able to do that in full capacity, I feel like I will have been successful. Deletta, would love to hear from you.
Sure. With NeighborWorks America, part of our assessment of organizations is that they have a neighborhood representatives on their boards, on their nonprofit boards. So the communities in which they serve, there's always representation. So success for us looks like, one, that you have representation, which means you have lived experience and you have the voice of the community in which you're receiving these dollars to help. But then also to see a community transformed, which I have seen many of them. When I mean transformative, not transactional. Transactional, you're just building a house here, house there. Transformative is when you walk onto a community and everything is just like, wow, right? And you have the cooperation and input from the residents who live in that community. So doing transformative, comprehensive community development is what we do here at NeighborWorks America. And that's just a part of what success looks like to me as an individual that works here, and also as our organization.
Awesome. I think now is time for our final question. So our final question is, community organizing work is notoriously difficult. How do you maintain mental health and self-care so that you can responsibly show up for others? I would love to hear anyone that would like to start it off.
I'll start with my 30-second quip, which is I try to take care of my physical body. So whether that's being in motion, drinking water, trying to laugh and be around people that I love. And then I try to take care of just the mental components, which is being in relationship with others and really finding my tribe, both in a work setting, right? So I know that the things that I think are great ideas aren't just crazy and radical, but they can actually happen. But then also being in community on a personal setting. And so friends, families, personal relationships are paramount and all of that for me. Jamie, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you so much. +1 to all of those. I think for me, it's just cultivating greater self-awareness as I get older around my own boundaries, around my needs, naming those things. We did a lot of work in a fellowship Maggie and I were part of that really highlighted the impact of burnout, especially in justice-led work, especially with women of color at the front lines, and really trying to think about how do we insulate and protect ourselves against that, because we hold multiple roles, multiple visions. We're bringing so much to this work, so much beauty and magic and complexity that oftentimes we forget to fill our own cups. So I've been just really sitting with that of how do I source myself in a way that brings me joy and love and safety and connection so that I can continue to sustain this work as an individual, but then have that impact collectively. Thank you for this question. What about you, Deletta?
Admittedly, that's a struggle for me sometimes, trying to balance it with other responsibilities, and then the passion for the work. So physical fitness for me, you got to take care of your temple so that it can take care of you. Sometimes, honestly, I just, it's like I appear to be very extroverted, but I'm actually an introvert. So sometimes I have to go, and after, it's you're giving of yourself, you have to kind of remove yourself and recharge. And I know when I've reached that limit, so I will kind of pull away and recharge. So you got to make sure that you understand your limits. And if you need to step away and recharge yourself, then that's exactly what needs to happen. And then I can't stress enough, physical fitness, it keeps that stress level down and it keeps you healthy.
Yeah. Chelsea, do you have any thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think, last year, when I lost my son, it definitely was just an eye opener to how much we take on our plates and what gets left off the plate when we take on certain things. And I think I'm still going through a journey of trying to figure that out, but that awareness unfortunately came not in the way that I wish I would have. I don't know if any of you here deal with mom guilt, but the mom guilt, especially after you lose a child, is loud and proud and very apparent. And so I think I'm just overall, it helped me to realize really the most important thing for me is my children and the time that I get with them. It's made me better at saying no to things that I felt like I needed to take on just so I could keep a job or just so it made me deal with my imposter syndrome to say, well, it doesn't matter, even if you don't feel like you're good enough, because the reality is if it's asking of too much of you, and it means the sacrifice of the time with your kids that's not promised, then it's not worth it anyway. So I've gotten much better to kind of drawing those lines. I'm not going to say that it's easy. The job is still very demanding, but it has helped me to at least filter out the things that I can do, the things that I put as a priority, and the things that can wait, which I wasn't great at before.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. We have just a few minutes left, and we want to do this, get some questions from our attendees. So, Shalane, we'll turn this over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't know about y'all, but we could go for some more time. Unfortunately, we don't have the time. But I just want to give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much, ladies, for being so vulnerable. But questions we have two. One is a two-parter. And so I think I'll start with that one. The question is, in the space that you work in, what do you do to ensure that financing companies, banks take legislation like the CRA seriously? And then number two is, have you any experience, or do you have experience in approaching non-compliant institutions? And so not everyone has to respond, but if you do have a response, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I have the opportunity to sit on an advisory council with Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That gives me an opportunity to be able to advocate for those types of things. In all honesty, I'm still very new to it, but it gives me just a holding space to take the information from community of what Native Hawaiians are dealing with, specifically in those sectors, and go back to the CFPB and say, hey, we need help on this, and let's work on this. And so that's one way that I'm working on that.
I'll give another quick example in the Dallas market. There was a gentleman that really took this to media, and there was a series of articles that came out that was called Banking Under 30. And it specifically actually called out banks that had not kind of met their CRA requirements, because that's pretty much all public information. You can look up that. And it got a lot of traction to the point where a lot of the banks did not want to be in the news. Some banks did not have mergers happen as a result of being in the news, right? So there are some kind of coalition / media components, strategies that can be used to put some fire on folks. And so the series is called Banking Under 30 in Dallas.
Thank you, Maggie. Does anyone else have anything to add to that question? Or two questions? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the other question, which is, what are some tangible steps we can take in our community to encourage more just housing options?
Please repeat the question.
What are some tangible steps we can take in our community to encourage more just housing options?
So I'm going to get on it on a very micro level, but we encourage people, if you're going to ever sell your home, you get a choice on who you sell to. You also have choices of putting on deed restrictions on that home, of what that looks like in the future for that home. You know, does the person that is going to purchase it, it could be an opportunity for you to say that this house must stay in an 80% and under, or 100% and under area median income household, right? There's lots of innovative ways. Again, I say innovative because it's new to everyday thinking, but our real estate developments do it all the time. They put restrictions on these properties. Anyone can do that. So I think maybe digging into a little bit more research of what you do in the market. If it was even just half of us, that would change the market completely. But if we keep looking at it in a colonized view, we need to profit as much as we can on the house that we've owned before, then we're going to keep being in this situation.
Jump in and say advocacy. Municipalities at the local government level receive community development block grant dollars as well as home dollars. Oftentimes these local governments use those for housing. Many local governments have housing plans and housing strategies. So having said that, being engaged, civically engaged, is a part of community building and engagement. So that's one. With your elected officials, make your voice heard in terms of allocating those resources towards affordable housing. Many state agencies also receive tax credits and things of that sort in terms of funding to be allocated towards affordable housing. So advocating for those at the at your elected official level is one way to start that.
Thank you, Deletta, for that. I want to add on from the tenant point of view. I think for a lot of folks that home ownership has not been possible, I think some of the tangible things we can do is, if we live in apartment buildings, talk to your neighbors, build a tenant association, get communicated with them. If you are ever facing, illegal rent increases, evictions, it's a lot easier to fight it if you are all united. And it's the common theme in my work. It's powers in numbers, and if you are not united, then we're not going to be able to survive this. But I think also pushing for ordinances at the local level, As Deletta mentioned, working with our elected officials to make sure that we have rent stabilization ordinances, that we have things like a right to counsel program, rental registries. There's a lot of tangible things that we can push for at the local level. So I would say building that community infrastructure amongst tenants, amongst homeowners, amongst the community who wants to see affordable housing being built and affordable housing being prioritized. And when we say affordable housing, we don't mean market price. We mean, actually affordable for the working families in that municipality. So I think in building that community infrastructure, advocating for that at the local level, and honestly taking somebody from that community and putting them in that seat of decision making. I think that's what it's going to take for us to be able to really, really get to the root of this issue, is that we need people with lived experiences, with the knowledge and the passion to actually get to the root of this issue. So I think solidarity amongst your neighbors and really getting civically engaged, that would be my 2 pieces of advice.
Does anyone have anything else to add before we close out?
I actually would like to add one quick thing.
Sure, absolutely.
I think for the final question we had about self-care in this type of work, I didn't get to answer this sooner, but I wanted to say there's 2 things that I would recommend to people. One is less tangible, which is, of course, water your own tree, find your people who can support you. But the other one is more tangible. You work in a nonprofit, unionize. Unionize, unionize, unionize. That is going to be my lived experience advice. I did it, and our staff saw the ability to finally being able to afford where they live, get better working conditions, raises, all of these things. These are very tangible things that are affecting, unions are helpful and for profits hate unions. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, unions, remember what a union is. It's just workers getting together, advocating for their working conditions and better pay and all this stuff. So I firmly believe that no industry, no sector, not even the nonprofit sector, is excluded from the need for a union. There is always a need for workers to come together and really.
Oh no, she was on a roll. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Well,
Jelani, can I speak to, I want her to come back, but someone mentioned community land trust. CLT is a proven way, shared equity is a proven way to sustain affordable housing. So that's great. We didn't talk a lot about that, but that was an excellent point that I wanted to bring.
okay. So we are at the end of our session today, Her Story, Her Power in Community Development. Thank you, Chelsie. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Deletta, for joining us today. Please, if you have not subscribed to Shelter Force, please do so. We will be sending out this recording, so you want to make sure that you subscribe, get all of our content, and hear about all of our events. We also will be sending up a follow-up. I will be talking to these panelists to see how folks would want folks to engage with them, and we will send out some follow-up information of how you can get connected with our panelists here today. But remember, this is the last week of Women's History Month. And so take a minute, appreciate who you are and what you bring to your community and to whatever table you're sitting at. And remember, it is your story, which means that it is your power. So have an amazing rest of your day, whatever time zone you're in. And thank you so much. Thank you, ladies, and everyone. Have a great afternoon.